Happy Monday, happy President's Day, and welcome to another edition of In Touch with Indiana Sports, powered by HoosierIllustrated.com. John Alden with you as always, and I hope you had yourself a great weekend. I feel like I've enjoyed the weekend. This is still my weekend right now. I'm recording this show on a Sunday afternoon, not something that I typically do, but because of some circumstances and still wanting to put out a show for you guys on a Monday, this is just the way things are today. Going to be a bit of a shorter show, no guests as well, and I will try to make it up to you on Wednesday. I'm going to try to double up on guests. No promises, but I will do my very best, because I'm sure there's some of you who enjoy the solo episodes or the solo content more so than the guest content, and I'm sure there's many of you who like the guest content more. That's just the way things, people have their different preferences. So I try to give you both flavors as often as I can. So I'll do my very best to get a couple of different guys on Wednesday. And then no show on Friday this week. I believe I teased that a little bit last weekend or heading into last weekend, but no show on Friday. My wife and I will be out of town for our baby moon. And I know some of you older folks, you boomers, some older millennials as well, Gen Xers, whatever you want to call it. You might be cringing at the whole baby moon trend, that's going on right now. Any excuse for a vacation, right? It's only a weekend long vacation, but we'll hopefully enjoy ourselves this upcoming weekend. Also, the snow is back. Overnight, it was very weird. I don't know how it was in your guys' neck of the woods, but Saturday night going into Sunday, it was raining heavily. It rained all day on Saturday, and going to sleep on Saturday, it was thunderstorming in our area, and we woke up to 3 inches of snow after that. So a very weird turn of events weather-wise this weekend. Woke up and shoveled the driveway. Thankfully, it wasn't like the ice that we received back in the early days of January, that was a huge pain. This was very simple, and I was able to clear off everything in about 25 to 30 minutes. Hopefully the same was true for you if you happen to get a decent amount of snow over the weekend. And maybe some of you are off work today. So if you're off work enjoying this for the President's Day holiday, then kudos to you. Hopefully you get to enjoy your long weekend. And if you're somebody who isn't off work today, hopefully you're enjoying this from wherever your place of work is. I'll still be at work whenever the show gets released. And that's another thing too. Don't some of you, I know some of you really enjoy the show getting released earlier in the day than it typically does, but that's usually only the case when I get to record this early. But I think it's better for the show's quality overall whenever I record it and it comes out in the afternoon, because I don't have to rush to put it together. Not that I feel like it's always rushed, but plans have to change every once in a while whenever I record earlier in the day. Because exactly, for that reason specifically today, no guests. So it kind of changes the vibe of the content, of course. But hey, if I do my very best, like I said earlier, to give you all flavors of the show. The 7 a.m. shows, the 1 or 2 p.m. shows, we got it all here on In Touch with Indiana Sports. And you never know which version of the show you're going to get, I guess, right? That's, I guess, part of the fun. One other thing that's going on right now that I won't be able to react to, and I know we don't talk a lot of racing on the show, but the Daytona 500, that's going on as we speak. So feel free to let me know what happened in the comments with the Daytona 500, if that's something that you enjoy. I used to really love NASCAR back whenever I was a young lad. My dad is a big NASCAR fan, or was. I don't know if he still watches it the way that he used to. But I used to really love the NASCAR video games as a kid as well. But for some reason, I don't know if I outgrew it. I don't think NASCAR is something that you just outgrow. You just move on and pick up different interests. But I haven't followed along with NASCAR the way that I used to. But anytime the Daytona 500 comes up, it always reminds me of the days where I used to really get excited about watching a NASCAR race on a weekend. So if you are somebody who enjoyed the Daytona 500, I hope you did. Again, I'm recording this as it's going on, so I'm not watching it. But hey, Hopefully you enjoyed it if you're watching it. And maybe you enjoyed some basketball. Maybe you didn't enjoy some Indiana basketball per se. But after I take a swig of this coffee here, we're going to dive headfirst into some more Indiana basketball conversation. Going to read some of your comments on the YouTubes, and we'll get into a number of other things today as well. We're also Brad Stevens and Mick Cronin also made a couple of statements, if you will. Mick Cronin's was more of a statement than Brad Stevens was, but we'll go over both of those. And then I guess I don't want to dissect every little bit of it. I mainly just want to talk about, why reporters ask coaches those questions in general, because oftentimes it feels like a waste. And I know it's not a waste. You have to do it because you never know when someone might slip up and, give someone some information that maybe wasn't meant to be given out. But we'll dive into more of that here in just a little bit. Indiana baseball, not off to the best start, unfortunately. We'll talk a little bit about some of their weekend results as well, and the results that I'll be speaking of. Though there will be another game that takes place between now and when this episode actually gets released on a Monday. But either way, I'll at least react a little bit to what happened in the first couple of games. And then we'll end the show today with a bit of a discussion on NCAA tournament expansion. And I'm not somebody who is in favor of this. I feel like most people who truly love college basketball, the purists, if you will, don't want to see NCAA tournament expansion. So without going any further into that right now, we'll do a little bit of that towards the end of the show. But that's kind of the rundown, if you will, for our Monday edition of In Touch with Indiana Sports, powered by HoosierIllustrated.com. And yes, that's all we're going to get into today. So without further ado, let's take a swig of this lovely coffee from my Hyrule coffee mug, and we'll get started here. Take a deep breath as well. Hopefully you guys are ready to go here on Monday. Let's go ahead and get rolling. So Indiana, if you missed the post-game wrap-up show over the weekend, it was another heartbreaker for the Hoosiers. And coming off of the win against Michigan State on the road, it really started to feel like that this Indiana team was beginning to play looser, right? With all of the head coaching uncertainty kind of in the rearview mirror. I mean, things aren't all fine and dandy in Bloomington, but the pressure of feeling like Mike Woodson is playing for his job, or the players may need to play for Mike Woodson, and they can still do that, but the pressure of trying to save his job, that's gone now, right? He's going to retire, step away, however you want to view it as. But it seems like Indiana had been playing looser since then. And I think for the most part against UCLA on Friday, I think they did that. But one thing that this UCLA team did better than a lot of teams really do at Assembly Hall is anytime Indiana made a run at the Bruins, they had a response every single time. We talked about it on the post-game wrap-up show. Indiana was steadily in that 5 to 10 point deficit range for pretty much the entirety of the second half until they got down to the nitty gritty, and they finally broke that 5 to 10 point barrier and got it within one possession. But the problem came when it felt like right then, with the pressure kind of back on for the first time in a while, Indiana's butt cheeks clenched once again. And that's something that we've gotten all far too used to this season. I mean, you can look at the last couple of seasons, but this season in particular, the clenched butt cheeks down the stretch is something that Indiana hasn't been able to really get past. And I know they came away with a close win on the road at Michigan State, so don't want to act like it's impossible for them to win close games like that. But Michigan State plays more of the buddy ball style that Indiana, it kind of matches up favorably with. In UCLA, and that Tyler Bilodeau, really their entire lineup, I feel like, could just shoot the three. They could just shoot lights out. And Indiana tried to match that on occasion during this game. And just other than Luke Goody and Mackenzie Mbako on occasion, I feel like they weren't able to go head to head in that regard. But unfortunate result for Indiana. I feel like, at least to me, the realistic expectation of Indiana getting to the NCAA tournament, like at this point, we shouldn't expect that, right? I don't want to act like it's completely impossible for them to do, because I did post on social media after the game on Friday that I feel like that loss against UCLA, it was kind of it for their chances. And maybe not completely, but realistically, right? Because if you look at the games that are left, you're going to have to beat Purdue. Something that is going to be, I mean, yeah, Indiana played very well against them in Mackey Arena earlier this month, but you have to win that game now. Yeah, you have to beat Purdue. You have to take care of business against Penn State. You have to, after that, you go on the road on the West Coast for 2 games. You have to take care of business against Washington. I think you have to beat Oregon on the road. Kyler would disagree with me on that if you listen to the post-game wrap-up show. But based on the lack of good wins that Indiana's been able to get, they have a couple now that we've gotten further into the season, but they really don't have a lot. So I feel like they have to beat Oregon on the road as well. And then you end the season against Ohio State at home. And I think you have to win. I mean, there's 5 games left. You can go on a 5-game winning streak and get to 20 wins going into the Big Ten tournament. I think you put yourself on the right side of the bubble at that point. Of course, it depends on what other teams do as well. But if you're able to do that, which I'm not predicting, I always feel like I have to disclaim that. I'm just kind of setting up the scenario that gets them into the NCAA tournament. If they're able to knock off 5 teams in a row, you could probably be happy with where they stand, and even more so if they win a Big Ten tournament game or 2. Now, if they lose to Purdue on, next Sunday, is it next? Yeah, it's next Sunday. Then that's it. That truly is your final nail in the coffin, other than winning the Big Ten tournament, right? Which, of course, we always need to remind ourselves, Indiana in the history of the Big Ten tournament has never been able to win it. So I don't think that is something that, especially with this team, that we should expect them to be able to do. So that's kind of where we're at with Indiana basketball right now. Of course, the head coaching discussions will continue those as things develop. Of course, we'll go over the Brad Stevens and Mick Cronin stuff here in just a bit as well. But before we continue forward, I do want to read a few of your YouTube comments that have been placed on the last few episodes. Appreciate them as always. We'll start with one that kind of just echoes a lot of what we've talked about, not only just in the last few minutes, but over the course of the season. Mean Weeneye 179. I think that's how I pronounce your username. He says, he or she, who knows, says this team just finds ways to lose, not enough grit to win close games. That's definitely the more harsher way to put it. I don't think maybe there is some truth to that. I just think for some reason they just get in their own heads down the stretch. Like Mackenzie Mbako missing that bunny of a layup or a putback, whatever you want to call it, against UCLA. That's something where I feel like if you're playing freely and you're not worried about what's going on and you're just playing your game, that's a shot that anybody at the Division I level will put away. But because the game was seemingly on the line, and there have been too many times this season, last season, where Indiana has come up short in those situations, this team truly doesn't know how to, and I'm going to say it, the Mike Woodson cliche, get over the hump. This team does not know how to get over the hump. And that's probably what Mike Woodson and his teams are going to be remembered by the most, is that they just could never get over the hump. And I think our friend, if you follow him on social media, Chronic Hoosier, said it best. He said, man, this hump is just a mother effer, trying to not. Someone wondered, well, just say the F word on screen. Just say it, man. Just say it. Well, sometimes whenever you say curse words on the old YouTubes and they get caught, it doesn't recommend videos to the younger audiences as much. So I'll try. There are times when I do dip my toe into saying a swear word or two, but if I'm just going to quote somebody, then I'll try to bleep it out, I guess. Anyway, getting a little too meta when describing that. I don't know why. I just felt the need to defend that for some reason. But yeah, thank you for the comment. And yeah, I think that's just kind of been the identity of the last couple of Indiana basketball teams. Let's see. This one, Sports Fan 938. This is actually a really good. So last week I struggled at trying to kind of get back on discussing some Indiana women's basketball because it's something I haven't really done a great job at keeping up with. But this comment right here kind of lays out everything a lot better than I could have. So here's what Sports Fan 938 says. Purdue women are among the worst in the league. IU needs to beat them twice. They then probably need one win between ranked Ohio State and Maryland or Michigan State, as well as winning the first game in the Big Ten tournament to make the NCAA tournament. Currently projected a 10 seed on the bubble. Wins over fellow tournament teams are Baylor and Columbia in the Bahamas, Iowa, Washington, and Nebraska. So thank you for that update, Sports Fan 938, keeping me on my toes. But Indiana did get a big win at home against Purdue over the weekend, 78-56. So with that being said, they did do part of what they need to do. They'll have a second opportunity to sweep Purdue at the end of the regular season, March 2nd. But coming up, the remainder games, the remaining schedule, regular season, I should say, they've got Ohio State on Thursday at home. That game will be on Peacock. They've got Michigan State on the 23rd. That'll be on the road. That game will be on Big Ten Network. And then Maryland on February 27th at home, also on Peacock. A lot of games on Peacock. The final game against Purdue will also be on Peacock as well. So Indiana will have some chance. Indiana women's, I should say. They'll have some chances to help solidify their NCAA tournament bid. And not a bad season when you've been so used to having your core of Mackenzie Holmes, and then the year before that you had Grace Berger. When you lose cornerstone pieces like that, usually a hard fall off. I want to say it would be excusable, but it'd be more expected than if you had a lot of returning players. But Terry Morin's been able to have, put together a decent season, put them in position to stay in the NCAA tournament conversation. And then what you do from there is just build off of what you've done this season. A setback when you lose players like that is fine, but you don't want it to be anything devastating. So shout out to Terry Morin for putting the Lady Hoosiers in position to potentially make another appearance in the Big Dance. They've definitely been a lot more successful than the men's team over the last several years. And that's 100% a fact, right? Like, we're not just saying that to take a shot at the men's team. That's just the way things have been. But yeah, thank you for the comment right there. And then one more comment I want to read. This is from Philip Burns, 1986. And I'm sure Philip Burns won't mind me saying this, but that's my grandfather. I appreciate he listens all the time. And I appreciate the comment that I'm about to read right here. So, appreciate you watching all the time and always being a good, supporting me and everything that I do. He says, first of all, he says thanks he enjoyed Mike DeCourcy, and then he says, my hope is we get Bruce Pearl, even though he's in his 60s. He's very energetic and he loves his style of basketball. Absolutely, Bruce Pearl. Even though he is older, I think there's a couple things that can be said about Bruce Pearl. First of all, I mean, he's at the top of the game right now. He's got Auburn as the best team in the country. They just defeated number 2 Alabama handily, I should say, fairly handily on the road at Alabama's arena, whatever they call it down there. And the fact that Auburn and Alabama are the top 2 teams in the country, when normally you would see that as, a football, them. You would expect those teams to be at the top of football as opposed to basketball. It's crazy, the shift that has happened in both sports, if we're being honest. The teams that have risen to the top of football and as well as basketball. But the way he's got them rolling, I mean, that part of that in and of itself may be why he wouldn't want to leave Auburn. But I think you can throw age aside for this, especially when you it's funny how I compare every head coach to Curt Cignetti now, but Curt Cignetti's as old as he is. I mean, Indiana football wouldn't trade him away for anybody, right? I mean, if you can get 10 good years out of somebody in their mid 60s, I think you could call that a successful tenure. And that's the thing. If you could establish success in that 10 or so year period, it makes it much easier to transition into whoever the following coach would be. And I know people worry, like people like to have the head coach that could be around for 20, even 30 years. I do feel like that's a lot more unrealistic nowadays than it used to be, just because there's so much change each and every year in college basketball and college football that people hop from job to job all the time. So I don't know if the 20, 30-year head coach is ever going to be a thing anymore. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but guys like Kirk Ferentz at Iowa, like he's still there, but like once he's gone, will Iowa be able to have somebody in there, take over who would stay around for another 20, 30 years, whatever it may be. So I think if you can get Bruce Pearl, which I think it will be very difficult to do, I do still think that is the one hire that is still in play, I might add, because I know everybody would love Brad Stevens. We'll get to why that won't be the case here in just a little bit. But Bruce Pearl is probably the one name remaining that I think would get everybody on the same page. I guess you could throw out the people who think he's just too old, but how old is too old when you have the number one team in college basketball right now? So I think he's more than worthy of being the next Indiana basketball coach if he wants it. And that's the big if. Would he want to leave Auburn at this point? I don't know. I wouldn't bet on it, but I would love it if he decided to become the next Indiana basketball coach. I still think I agree a lot. I think it was Mike DeCourcy who said this. He had mentioned that there's a lot, or there's been so many years where you haven't had power coaches, or coaches at power programs, I should say, going from one power program to the next. You don't really see that, and so I tend to think if they don't get one of the, it's not even if, I tend to think it's more than likely that they'll land one of the up and comers as opposed to one of the proven guys at the Power 4, Power 5 level. And that's why I keep throwing Ben McCollum out there. I think he may end up being a diamond in the rough for whoever ends up unearthing him, so to speak. Nice, like a little pun right there. That pun definitely intended in that joke. But Ben McCollum, whether he ends up at Indiana, Iowa, or somewhere else, I think whoever ends up getting McCollum will have someone who is a really good head coach that could make his name. I mean, I know I'm becoming cliche myself. He's going to be the next Signetti, I think. Whoever gets him, it will be, I don't think it should be surprising, but it might surprise a lot of people what kind of success he'll have at a power program. So we'll see. But thank you for the comment, Gramps. I'll, I always appreciate you listening and watching, and hope you're doing well. And let's go ahead and we'll go ahead and transition here. I do want to talk more about the head coaches. I think that might be a good way to transition into the head coaching discussion. But I mentioned that Brad Stevens and Mick Cronin had both made statements of sorts when it comes to the Indiana job. Some of them are more, I'll just get into what they said, and then we'll kind of break down what it really means. Brad Stevens is a little more simplistic than Mick Cronin, so we'll start with him. Jeff Goodman reported this back on Friday. I'll just read the tweet verbatim. It says, breaking: Boston Celtics president of basketball operations Brad Stevens told the Field of 68 that he is not a candidate for the Indiana University job. And then he puts in quotations, "I thoroughly appreciate being a Celtic and love the people I get to work with every day." So, two things. I guess first, if the quote doesn't say anything that he didn't want the job. I'm just assuming, maybe without putting a direct quote, that he just said in another quotation that he didn't want the Indiana job. But the quote itself that Jeff Goodman puts in this post is, "I thoroughly appreciate being a Celtic and love the people I get to work with every day." That's not definitive of anything. So I don't know if that quote really tells you anything. I still don't think anybody should think Brad Stevens is going to really flirt with the Indiana job. But unless Brad Stevens said something else other than what Jeff Goodman put in the quote, that doesn't really say a whole lot. you just have to assume that Jeff Goodman's reporting is correct, and he is one of the most reliable reporters in the college basketball scene. So I do believe him when he says that he's not a candidate for the Indiana University job. I just would have thought you would put a different quote out there if he had said something else, more definitive, I should say. But either way, that's all the discussion until something else were to arise. We'll just take that as gospel, right? Because I've said from the beginning, I don't think Brad Stevens is ever somebody who's going to genuinely consider the Indiana job, especially at this point. Like, you're so far removed from the college game. And I know Zach Osterman said that he would probably adjusting to this new world of NIL and transfer portal, all that stuff. Like, yes, he's used to it from being in the NBA. That's kind of how the NBA has been ran, of course, in a little more condensed or, controlled environment, I should say, than this nonsense that is the Wild West of the transfer portal and NIL. But there's so many coaches. Billy Donovan also fits into this category where I just don't think that they're so far removed. Why would they want to go back to the college game? You would only come back if it is like your dream scenario, right? And Brad Stevens has been offered so many times to be the Indiana head coach. It's clearly not his dream to be the Indiana men's basketball head coach. So I firmly believe that he'll never flirt with the Indiana job unless he just, the only reason, like, if he fell off the map, like, let's just say something happened, he got let go by the Celtics and he needed to get back on his feet or something. I don't know. I'm not saying this would ever happen, but if he ever needed the Indiana job more than it needed him, that would be the scenario where he would take it, I feel like. And again, don't foresee that ever happening. Excuse me. Love me some coffee. This is at least my third cup today, maybe fourth. And again, I'm recording. It's currently 2:03 at this point. So, fueled by coffee here on In Touch with Indiana Sports. All right, we're back. What you didn't just see is that during one of my swigs of coffee, I just went down the wrong pipe and I about choked on it. But we're back. We're feeling all right. And we're going to continue this discussion. I want to get into Mick Cronin now. This is what he said when asked about the Indiana position the other day. He said, quote, "As far as me, I would never comment on a coaching situation. It would be wildly inappropriate because I'm the son of a coach, and the way I look at it is that Mike Woodson's the coach at Indiana. That man's coaching his basketball team, and he was a national champion. I happen to know him. I know Kenya Hunter on his staff extremely well for many years and have tremendous respect for their kids and their team. To me, nobody should say anything that distracts from anything with them with that. So I just think it would be wildly inappropriate, mostly for what I said. My respect for Coach Woodson. He's over there coaching his team. That's my stance on that stuff." So a whole lot of nothing. I mean, he's being a professional, which is, I want to say, a rarity for Mick Cronin, because I do think he's good at his job. I think he showed how disciplined his team is the other day against Indiana, but he's not always been the most professional behind a microphone, so to speak. But that was a very professional response from him. And it doesn't really say a whole lot. Doesn't give you any indication, and it shouldn't, I guess, right? I don't really think Mick Cronin still would be somebody that it shouldn't be at the top of anybody's list. He's the guy you go to if all the big names say no, if a lot of the up-and-comers say no, and he seems like he's genuinely interested. So, and one thing that I think that would be appealing to him, like why he would want the Indiana job, is all the complaining he's done as, being the coach at a former Pac-12 school that is now forced to play in the Big Ten in a conference where there's only 3 other West Coast teams, and you have to do all this traveling to play primarily teams in the Midwest. And so I think, that's probably for him personally one of the primary appeals of any other Big Ten or SEC job, is that if you're not coaching, that's going to end up being an issue whenever all these jobs, throughout the different coaching carousels that happen over the next several years. Coaches are going to have to think about that now. Like if they want to take UCLA, USC, any of the jobs where you are in a conference that is where your school is much further away than the majority of the conference, that's going to come into play with a lot of job openings in the future. Because I think if Mick Cronin let's just say he was looking for a job right now and UCLA was an option, I don't think he would take it now. Now he's already there now, so it's not going to make a difference at that point, but he knows how much he hates it. So I doubt he would do something like that again if he had to switch jobs. But I think that could be one of the more appealing factors for him if he's considering taking the Indiana job, if it, of course, gets offered to him. So who knows? Who knows if he's even interested? I don't know of how good of a fit he would be at Indiana, but I think if we're being honest, he'd be better than we have right now. So, all right, that about does it for the head coaching discussion. And with that, we'll go and do a couple more things, and then we'll wrap up today's episode. And for starters, I want to get into this will be quick. So I'll start with the Indiana baseball results from over the weekend. They've been playing in the Sanderson Ford College Baseball Classic. They started off 0-2, lost to UNLV 2-4 in the opening game on Friday night, lost to Xavier in extra innings 6-8 on Saturday. And at the time of this recording, they are currently getting started against number 7 Oregon State. So again, there will be a result by now on how that game plays out. And of course, that would be a great way to get back on the right track if you're able to defeat the Beavers. I can't think, are they currently the reigning baseball national champions? I don't know off the top of my head, but I know they are one of the powerhouses when it comes to the college baseball hierarchy, if you will. So, and then they'll also play UNLV once again today. I'm referring to Monday, of course. And then they'll return home to Bloomington on Wednesday for their first home game in Bart Kaufman Field, a winter edition of baseball at Bart Kaufman Field. So I'm sure you diehard Indiana baseball fans will be out and about in Bloomington, even if the weather is less than ideal for some baseball. So for those of you who will be partaking, enjoy. But we'll talk more baseball here and there, not a whole lot, but I mean, if they start making some noise and they're worth talking about a lot more than just a couple of minutes, then we'll do that. But again, they'll kind of fall into the category of the non-revenue mentions that we've done previously. So I do want to at least have one segment with somebody who does cover the Indiana baseball team here soon, to kind of give me an idea of what to expect from the rest of the season. Hopefully I can get that taken care of for us. But we'll go and move on to our final point of discussion today, and that is apparently it's fairly likely that the NCAA tournament will be expanding here in the very near future. And I want to get this started by playing a piece of sound from College Game Day over the weekend, and then I'll share my thoughts afterward on what was said. So this is this Pete Thamel? This is I think it's Pete Thamel. It's somebody on College Game Day who is explaining the likelihood of NCAA tournament expansion. So I'll let that roll right here.
That the more likely option, if the tournament were to expand, would be to 76. The NCAA has been in discussions with its media partners for a while on this now, and a decision on whether it does go to 76 would come in the next few months. The move to 76 would be historic. By adding 8 teams, it would be the biggest jump in what the tournament looks like since 1985. The logistics of what that could look like have not been set yet, but it's likely that an additional site, like they have Dayton for the first 4, would be added. Think of a place outside of the Eastern time zone for that to happen. One likely wrinkle here is that if the men's tournament expands by 8 teams to 76, the women's tournament would expand as well. So there's a lot of variables here, Reese. Everybody would have to stay financially whole for this to happen. This has obviously been driven by the power conferences through expansion. You've heard Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti be bullish about this expansion. So ultimately, can the money come together and can the sides come together and figure out a way to go to 76?
They're kind of booing this. Do you guys not want expansion? No expansion? They're happy with 68. They believe 68 is the perfect number. I don't know.
And that's the whole point that I want to get out here. Nobody wants this to happen except Greg Sankey and apparently Tony Petitti as well. I didn't know how big of a deal it was to him, but Greg Sankey I've always seen as the guy who really pushed for this from the beginning. Why fix something that's not broken? Nobody complains about the number of teams that are in the NCAA tournament right now. Some may even say that there's too many. Like, what's the point in having, a UMBC in the NCAA tournament, right? But you know what the point is? You get a 16 over a 1. But, maybe what's the whole thing? I guess maybe the point is we need to see a 17 seed beat a 1 seed. Hey, we need to get more of that nonsense going on in the NCAA tournament. I don't think that's really what they're going for. I know what it is both Sankey and Petitti want as many SEC and Big Ten teams in the tournament as possible for money. It's all about money. Now, tournament expansion, in my opinion, was necessary for football because what good is just putting the 4 best teams in a playoff going to do? Like a playoff, I think 16 is probably as high as you ever want to go, especially in football. But it makes it more of a instead of Mike DeCourcy used to call it like an invitational, right? Now it feels like it's more of a tournament, because there's auto bids and that sort of thing. What's the point? 68 to 76. What does that really add? It adds 8 teams. What does that do for the tournament? I remember Sankey, I think he said, well, maybe I'm wrong about this. Didn't he want 90-something teams? That's nonsense. I don't know if this is their way in just like taking a baby step toward getting to the 90s. But I love how the crowd booed at that, by the way. I don't know if that sends any sort of real message, but all of the facts that Mr. Pete Thamel was just spitting right there, especially when he's throwing out potential host sites and stuff, or like saying that it would be in a different location. It shows that this is already in progress. Like there's already movement with this, that they fully intend on doing this. I don't know what it would take for this to fall through, but I hope to God that it does, because we don't need this. Eventually when everything becomes about money, there's eventually going to be a downfall. You eventually want too much money. And maybe I just sound like an idiot right now because I don't have a lot of money, but that's just the way that I see it. I hope they don't ruin college sports with their money grabs and everything. But for college basketball specifically, I don't think there's any real benefit for the fan experience of expanding it, right? I'm not going to sit here and act like it wouldn't be great for the TV executives and whatever, but why should I care about what the TV executives want? All right. I think that's going to wrap it up for a Monday edition of In Touch with Indiana Sports. Again, a little shorter than usual, but I feel like we accomplished a lot today in a shorter amount of time. So we'll be back on Wednesday, hopefully with a couple of guests for you, a couple of discussions on a number of different things. And we'll be back then to do it all again. So be sure to subscribe on Hoosier Illustrated. Hit that notifications bell if you want to know when all of our shows and different content are posted on the channel. And be sure to check out everything going on at HoosierIllustrated.com as well. Until Wednesday, this has been another edition of In Touch with Indiana Sports, powered by HoosierIllustrated.com.